people are telling us that they're not happy. This is not a new phenomenon. And I think there's a level of exhaustion. We've got to finally crack the code.
What is all of this for? Where is this going? Like every day, yeah, I click the buttons, I do the things, I go in the meetings, but like I need to also feel like I ladder up to the bigger picture.
Absolutely. And that's become more important to more of us, being able to live on purpose, make a difference. And leaders who understand that, they see how, what they're doing here rolls up into.
Hey everybody, I'm really excited to bring you today's episode, finally, with Julie Winkle Giulioni. She wrote the book, Help Them Grow or Watch Them Go. And this episode is a banger. If you're looking to get started with career development, employee development, she has so many great tips, tricks, and explains how to get executive buy-in. She talks about the business case for employee development and how it translates into sales and quality and innovation, which all affects the bottom line and retention. It's all good for business, but sometimes it's hard to get executives to care about why this is important. And employees, I promise you, are craving this type of conversation with their manager. So her book is so much fun to read. For me, I read the whole thing in a day. It would probably take you a few days, maybe a week or two. It's so entertaining and witty and intelligent, and I'm excited for you to learn about what she has to say about this concept of manager curiosity and getting your managers to ask the right questions, because career conversations can happen bit by bit. It just has to be baked into your culture and taught to your managers, who often don't know what they're doing. I know we've talked about that a lot. So your managers would probably appreciate this kind of a approach to retention and unlocking higher performing, more productive teams, because that's good for them and good for business. Like, just to give you a quick little taste, and we'll dive into the episode, she has a little one-liner that's in the book. It says, employees are not entitled whiners with unrealistic expectations. And I know that you're probably nodding along like, yeah, that's true for me too. I know it was true for me, and I was made to feel kind of bad in my career to be like, where's this going? Where's this headed? You don't want employees to leave your organization with all their skills, all their knowledge of how your company works, without doing everything you can to find ways to keep them and grow them with your organization and expand their responsibilities in a way that makes sense for both them and your business. And you can do this at really any company size. So enjoy today's episode and definitely go out and get Julie's book. It is such a entertaining, fun read. It's so easy to understand, and she puts things in really simple terms. So there's my little preamble. I hope you drink enough water today and go for a walk and pet your dog or cat. And if you have children, look them in the eyes and say, I love you. This life is funky for the adults sometimes, and we're doing our best. All right, enjoy the episode. So, Julie, you've written 2 books. First of all, the one I read is a banger, but you wrote Promotions Are So Yesterday, and the book today we're going to talk about is Help Them Grow or Watch Them Go, which is like a great title. This book's on its 3rd edition, but it's all about the critical conversations that need to happen for career development. Julie, I have to say, like, this was my favorite business book I've read in years.
Oh my gosh, that means a lot coming from you.
I'm all over Atomic Habits and 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And I'm like, yes, I get it. Thank you for the knowledge. Your book is so good because it not only tackles the thing that people feel like they can't wrap their arms around, which is career development, but you do it in a funny, intelligent, witty way that I just felt like that was the easiest, most helpful read. I left feeling like I'm equipped. So thank you for writing something that's not boring.
Thank you. Thank you for reading.
In the beginning of the book, you say career growth is a company's best competitive advantage. To me, even, this seems so obvious, but why do you think so many leaders think it's too big of an undertaking and not worth the investment?
I think for a lot of leaders, they don't understand fundamentally what career development is, what it's all about. I mean, they built it up to be this massive, 2 hours off in a corner, big agenda, plans for a year sort of event. That's daunting to anyone. And so a lot of leaders, I think, have just sort of pushed it off into the corner because they're just not ready for that kind of a commitment. When the is career development is really a relationship. It's an ongoing conversation. It's a thread of dialogue that leaders who are engaged with their folks participate in and day out. It's doable. It's actionable. Leaders who are willing to kind of flip the switch and redefine it in their minds.
You talk a lot about how these can be bite-sized conversations, and you give the example that when a manager is equipped, this can be a 10-minute conversation ongoing in every one-on-one, as opposed to, like, it doesn't need to be this 2-hour clunky road mapping session that's very comprehensive and exhausting.
Yeah. Yeah. And the world is just changing too fast. Things are moving too quickly. You think about even strategic planning for organizations. We used to do that for 5 and 10 years. And now it's like the next 6 months, what are we going to do? How can we expect that careers that operate in that dynamic environment are going to be able to be plotted out in such a, one and done, once a year sort of way? It's got to be more iterative. We've got to be more flexible and agile and be able to zig and zag as the business landscape changes, but also as people's interests and needs change.
Oh, I mean, a lot of this book is written to train your managers. And Gallup says 70% of disengagement is driven by the manager because for some reason we just assume managers know exactly what they're doing and they don't. It's a totally different skill set. I like that in one of your chapters, you're talking about how you can start having these conversations in the interview and give a much better first impression to drive engagement early in having a career discussion. And I just wanted to pull out an example, if that's okay, to give my listeners just a little taste. The never ending interview. Keep the interview going when you're trying to like find the next best hire for your department or the role. These are the questions you should be asking to figure out not only who this person is and if they're a culture fit, but like if you pick them, you'll have had foundational discussions early. Here's an example of what a hiring manager could ask to get a better picture of who this person is and where do they want to go. So the skills and strengths, open-ended questions. What have you always been naturally good at? What can't you keep yourself from doing? What are you known for? I can't tell you how many interviews I've been through where I'm like, oh my God, this place does not have it together. If I was asked even any of these questions, which you give a big comprehensive list, I would have been so impressed and so excited to join the organization. I just wanted to talk a little bit about these prompts that you give and why they're so important and to do this so early.
Yeah. Well, and just going back for a second, you talked about managers and leaders struggling with this. A lot of times it's because they've not had the experience themselves. They don't know what good looks like. So what I found is most managers, most leaders, they want to do this well. They stepped up to leadership because they wanted to make a difference. And developing someone's career, helping somebody to grow, I mean, that's the most significant difference that we can make. And so, what leaders need in order to make that happen is really these prompts. We find that if a leader, if a manager has the questions to ask, that's half the battle. And so, in the book, we've got about 100 or so of these questions sorted through, our central conversational model. But you're right; those kinds of questions that we ask in the interview set the tone. They also will communicate really powerfully to a candidate how you as a leader think about development and growth and careers. So it does expectation setting. But the problem is for a lot of leaders, that's where the curiosity ends is during the interview. And we've got to bring that curiosity and bring those questions throughout someone's career because what they're good at, what they're interested in, what they're known for, what they want to do, that's going to shift and morph over the course of a career. And we need to pause leaders to understand that. But we also have to help employees pause and think about it because they're busy too. They're scrambling. They're not hitting the pause button and thinking, okay, who am I today? Just organically.
Right. You talk about the importance of managers growing their curiosity quotient and to ask more questions and listen a lot more than they're used to. That paired with the gag your fix it reflex, which is another one of those hilarious titles that was making this easy to understand. Can you talk about the importance of those two things and what that means and how, like, why a manager needs to be thinking that way?
Yeah, when we think about curiosity, so frequently it's kind of a amorphous. And yet the truth is, it is absolutely a skill that we can develop that has to do with asking great questions, being present, listening. But we also have to stop the internal stuff that we bring to the conversation that starts to break down the curiosity and the ability to make the most of that conversation. And so the fix it reflex is the one that so many of us as leaders have just honed to a very fine point. We got to where we are because we know how to make things happen. We understand problems. We know the solutions. And yet, in a conversation with an employee, whether it's career development or problem solving on the job, something technical with regard to the job, if we're giving people the answers, if we're fixing it for them, we're not allowing them to grow. We're not allowing them to have experiences and learn and fail and develop. And so by, suspending that natural desire to make things easier for them, because it's all out of, a sense of benevolence. We actually, if we can stop that, we can open up the space to be able to hear more and allow for a lot more growth and development.
If they say, "Oh, just do it this way. That's what I've done in the past." That's not how people want to be led. People want to feel like they're the main character of their story.
Yeah. Oh, I love the way you've described it because what you're describing is a development relationship. It's not one conversation, but it's an ongoing dialogue where seeds are planted, where time is allowed for reflection, where we come back and close the loop, where real care is being demonstrated and support for the individual. And I would bet you that those managers and leaders who behave that way earned a level of loyalty and a work ethic that it was unbeatable.
Yes, absolutely. And I also had something with them that you mentioned in the book called psychological safety, where I felt safe to say, I'm messing up or I don't know what to do. I'm frustrated with myself. And I trusted that manager to say, let's unpack this. I'm with you. I'm here with you. Yes, you can do this. Let's do this together. Without that psychological safety, you can't have the radically candid discussions.
Right. And without psychological safety, why would anyone engage in the risky business of growth and it's scary. You're doing something you've never done before. You could fall on your face. It could all fall apart. If you don't know that that manager or leader has your back, that failure's not going to be fatal, that you're going to work it out together, you really don't have a very open space for learning and growth.
This book healed me so much of my experience of working in the workplace, of feeling so lost sometimes and wondering what was wrong with me. So, my listeners know that I bring not the perspective of HR, I've never worked in HR. I bring the perspective of the disengaged employee and the revenue obsessed executive. And I've now zoomed out to say, oh, everyone's misunderstanding each other. You specifically healed a very traumatic event for me when you're quoting Amy Edmondson, a Harvard researcher, I believe, who coined the term psychological safety. And I can remember a sales leader coming to me and saying, no one's participating in the sales meeting. And I said, I think it's because I had just heard the term. I don't think we have psychological safety in that meeting. There's not really enough room for us to help offer solutions. And when we do, you kind of shut people down and it's a public forum and it sucks and people are uncomfortable. And I remember him saying, psychological safety is not a thing. What are you talking about? And I remember thinking, well, this is why we don't have it. You're not even willing to let me bring a new concept to you, but it's literally so meta. Tell me we don't have psychological safety without telling me, well, we don't have psychological safety. Tell me it's not real. That's a term that managers need to be coached on and trained, which pause on your book, but like you offer trainings on this, correct? It's a big undertaking to get all these people on the same page.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And managers, leaders, they need help formulating the words and the questions and the approaches to these conversations. So yeah, we do a lot of training of managers and leaders and employees too, because that's the other side of it. Of course, once you've got a manager who's skillful, you still need an employee who's willing to own their development. Someone who's willing to be an active partner, who's not going to be a passive consumer of career development services, but who's really going to get in the driver's seat with the support of the manager or leader.
Really, it has to become baked into your culture, which it begins with executive buy-in. If you've been tasked with employee growth or any kind of like career mapping, people kind of just go online and they're like, has anyone ever done career mapping before? And that's not exactly what your book is about. It's related to it. It's not like this is the guide on career mapping, literally step by step. But for you to make any impact, do you agree, Julie? Like it has to start at the top. It has to come with permission that this is what drives a business forward.
Yeah, I think it needs to come even more, Christy, than with permission. It needs to come with endorsement and modeling. When people in the organization see senior leaders demonstrating curiosity, talking about careers in new ways, sharing their own journeys vulnerably, when they see that senior leaders are behaving differently and really embracing a growth culture and approach, then that goes beyond giving permission. Suddenly people see what it looks like. They feel like, okay, this is what our organization is all about. And they're going to, people follow the leader, right? They're going to follow those behaviors. So helping to leaders to embrace and behave differently around career development is really key.
One thing that you said that I think executives need to get clear in their head is that employees are not entitled whiners with unrealistic expectations. Thank you. Because I was made to feel so difficult for trying to push to have my own career conversations and being seen as, oh, she just wants a promotion, or we don't just, oh, she's being noisy again. And those were smaller, less equipped companies, but this is an investment in retaining your talent. It's expensive. You talk a little bit about like the financial ramifications of not doing this well at scale. Can you talk a little bit about that? Anyone who's got an executive and they need to influence them in those terms.
Yeah, there is such a compelling business case to engage in effective career development. We know that development's one of the key drivers of engagement. And engagement unlocks discretionary effort, which serves all dimensions of the business. When people are willing to give more, that translates into better service, translates into sales, quality, innovation, and the bottom line, which is your retention. And so any organization that is looking at career development only needs to look at their exit interview data to realize that spending a little effort around career development could totally change the calculus of retention and attrition in their organization.
Yeah, I mean, employees will go somewhere else and take their skills and all their tribal knowledge of how your company works and go start over somewhere else because it's not worth it for them to stay stuck at an organization that there's no path. And what's the point? If time's our most precious resource and we only have so many good, healthy working years to provide for our families, it's just one of those initiatives I hear people say, like, we'll get to it, we'll do it later. And then when they do get to it, they half execute it because they don't know what they're doing. I just want my listeners to really check out your book, just cover to cover, to have a much better understanding of what this could look like. But what advice do you have for someone who's not doing this at all? A certain company size, we'll say 50 employees to 1,000. If they're like, we don't even think about this, how do I just start doing this?
It's probably one of the most compelling actions that a leader can take, just because of everything that career development can ultimately deliver to the business. And I think we start by really looking at it from the other side of the table, looking at your employees, especially when you think about the last several years coming out of COVID, folks are looking for a different kind of relationship with their work. They're looking for an opportunity to make a contribution, to have greater choice and control, to make connections with others. People are looking for a lot beyond a new pathway or a promotion. They're looking for an elevated experience, and that experience kind of settles into the relationship they have with their boss. So as a leader who understands that, simply carving out, as you mentioned early on, 10 minutes during a one-on-one to ask a handful of questions. But how's it going? What are you learning? How are you making the greatest impact? What would make your life more meaningful today? How do you see the future changing? And how do you want to step into that? Questions like that. I love the expression you used earlier. They worm their way around someone's brain. They might not have an answer right away, but they'll think about it. And then the quality of that next conversation just goes up and up and up. And so over time, we've got that dialogue, a development dialogue that just undergirds the relationship. and becomes part of what elevates the employee experience.
Yes. And you're also talking about a manager who has the headspace to have these conversations well. You talk a little bit about if you're going to ask the question, listen and be present and follow through and be prepared to have answers. You can't ask the hard questions and then not follow up with anything meaningful to take the conversation forward.
And if I could just jump in, Christy, because you ask the questions, be curious, be present, listen, take the information, but don't feel like you have to have the answer. What you need is that next question, because that's part of what causes managers and leaders to back off. Is it's like, I don't have all the answers. I don't know how to do it. So if we can let leaders know, you don't have to have the answer. Have that next question. Put the onus on the employee and then figure out together, where are the resources? What can we do? It's a collaboration. Once we take that pressure off leaders, suddenly career development is a lot more doable and it's more joyful.
I must have read it too quickly. You must have the answers. If anything, it's you need to carry that curiosity through some kind of potential solution together. But if you don't have to be the only one to figure it out, but you do have to be there as the leader to make sure some kind of resolution is figured out together.
Yeah, it's a partnership there.
But would you say most companies treat managers as just another individual contributor who gets paid more, and they're not taught to be the strategizer and the relational leader who is very dialed into the different personalities and how everyone fits together, where the team's going? Most managers are not given permission to operate that way.
A lot of managers and leaders are technical experts who were, great at what they did and were elevated into a whole new role with a whole new skill set that they may or may not be prepared to step up to. So you're absolutely right. And that's really why we wrote the book, was to be an easy tool for someone, because most of those people, they want to do it well and need the tools, need the resources to do it. That's also why with this edition of the book, we created this book bot. We realized that so many leaders want to do it. They read the book, they've got good intentions. Okay, so now what do I do? And so we've got an AI tool where literally a leader or reader can type in, hey, I'm going to have this conversation with Christy. Here's what we've talked about before. Here's what I think she's interested in. Here's how I think she might respond. And it'll help to co-create an outline for that conversation, coming up with questions and strategies from the book. And then you can even practice, have a rehearsal with the bot to work through the kinks so that a leader who wants to do the right thing is enabled to do so.
This is so exciting to hear you describe what this could look like. Have you seen this happen yet?
In countless organizations, we've got lots of organizations that are doing this in simple ways, with everything from, keynotes to workshops to the bots that help leaders pull what they need when they need it so that they can step up in a way that they want to.
Well, shame on me because you just mentioned your bot. So can you explain a little bit more deeply who can access your bot?
Yeah, so it's there's a note in the book and on our website, help-them-grow.com. And you have to have the book because you got to put in a secret word, and then you have immediate access to it.
Your book, I mean, I could sit here for hours and we could have multiple podcast episodes. It was really a struggle to even figure out, like, what do I want to ask you? There's so much I want to ask you about. But really, I'm curious, like your story. You have a deep background in training, and there's so much passion and wit in here, which means you deeply understand the concept. When you can have fun with how you're explaining it, and you're explaining it in a way that makes sense and it's practical, that's very intelligent. So what led you to write a book? At what point in your career were you like, you know what, this is my passion and I want to do this really well? Like, what was that moment like for you? How did you decide to do this?
Well, first of all, thank you. That's the highest compliment ever. So I really appreciate that. I had the most amazing bosses until I was almost 30 years old. I did not understand what all my friends were complaining about bad bosses and, being stuck in a corner doing meaningless work. I had bosses who just created the space for me to keep growing. When I got bored or when I got skilled up on something, they opened a door and let me, not necessarily take on a new role, but learn new skills. So I just had this Camelot experience. And then I hit my first, I think of it as a bad boss, but she was just normal, not equipped didn't give a hoot about my development, just wanted my production out the door every week. And that was when I just realized, wow, I had no idea the positive impact that a positive boss who was growth oriented had until I had the contrasting experience. So that was when I really got into leadership development, ultimately into this, corner, this niche around career development, because I think it's a game changer. When it's done well, it absolutely changes an employee's experience. Meaningful things for the individual, but also for the organization.
So, what are all the variety of reasons people would reach out to you? Like, what are some of the use cases? We kind of touched on this, but paint me a picture of like the types of organizations you tend to work with and what's their problem statement.
So, we work with organizations literally around the world, public and private, large and small, because the challenge of career development is not unique to any one organization or industry. So, what I typically hear is we're losing good people. Our engagement scores stink. When we look at climate surveys, the lowest items are career development. And people are telling us that they're not happy with the kind of experience that they're having around them. And so that gives us a wide open space to start talking about the culture, the systems and processes, and then at the core, the skills that leaders bring to the party to change that dynamic.
I've been very fascinated with how logical these problem statements are. We have turnover. We have we're losing good talent, but there really is a deep emotional pain of like, this is awful. Our culture's off the rails. I'm scared of failing. I'm scared I'm going to get fired if I don't get this figured out. Or we're growing and things are already not working. So what's going to happen when we throw 200 more employees at this employee experience? So, have you also noticed this mix of like it's a qualitative and quantitative problem in how it's approached to fix it?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. And I think the overlay there too is we've got a workforce that has heightened expectations. And so that's a pain point. And then I think we've got human resources, talent development people who have been struggling with this for a long time. We've been talking, the first edition of this book came out 12 years ago. This is not a new phenomenon. And I think there's a level of exhaustion. We've got to finally crack the code. So I think there's kind of a sense of urgency. Let's get it done finally now.
I think too, have you heard of the employee hierarchy of needs from Gallup?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So I love to use this as a foundation to explain why things that don't seem important are the most important thing you should be focused on. So another way of saying that is people will say, we don't have time to invest in this and do it well. And I think to flip that on its head, you don't have time to not figure this out and do it well, because very low on the hierarchy of needs is like, I know it's expected of me at work, which is part of like, I can have a critical conversation with my manager and have that relationship to feel close with them and feel like, yes, I can do my job, assuming that's clear. Sometimes that's not clear. The job role expectations and what are goals, that's a different conversation. But like, I know it's expected of me at work, even like to this level of, I know that when I show up at work, this place is like where I'm going to give my best effort. And my time is of good use here for both of us, for the organization and for me. And if people don't feel like, having a path to grow is part of the employee hierarchy of needs, but it's much higher. And that's the literal version of this. But I know it's expected of me at work is like, what is all of this for? Where is this going? Like every day, yeah, I click the buttons, I do the things, I go in the meetings, but like I need to also feel like I ladder up to the bigger picture.
Absolutely. And that's become more important to more of us over the last several years. Being able to live on purpose, make a difference, really have that sense of meaning that what I do matters. And leaders who understand that, I mean, development fits into it, but there's also just conversations helping connect people to that bigger picture, painting them into that bigger picture so that they see how, what they're doing here rolls up into patient outcomes, customer innovation, whatever it might be that your organization is prioritizing.
So with so many versions of your book, Julie, like it's covered when remote work hit and the pandemic and now AI, and your book's going through so many iterations. but the constant message is staying the same, is that this is a worthy investment and something your employees are starving for, which I'm just going to drop one more funny thing you put in the book, which it's funny, we call it feedback. Most employees are on a low feedback diet. I was like, oh yeah, that's exactly how it feels. I just wanted to thank you for making something that feels so big and hard to figure out, so digestible, so actionable. And the parts of the book where you say, what about you? How does this apply to you? Was a really special surprise too. So thank you for writing this book and making such a hard topic so easy to understand.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome. And I will post this to all my Engagement Academy listeners here. I hope you're in Engagement Academy. You better be, because we're having the trainings and the templates and the course, the discussions with people just like you, so that we listen to these episodes and we break it down and we talk about it as a group. Julie, for the sake of us wrapping things up here, how can people find you and connect with you? What are the best places for people to find you online?
Probably my website, juliewinklegiulioni.com, and I'm on LinkedIn. And of course, the book, everything you need to know, can be found at help-them-grow.com.
Lovely. Julie, thank you so, so much for coming on the show. And I can't wait to read your next book and have you on again.
Me too. Thank you.